here's what keeps you from mastery. The fact that you're here says a lot about you. And I appreciate you being here because most people don't show up for things. And I feel like the thing that keeps you from becoming a master or on that path of mastery are these words saying, oh, I know that already. Do you know what I mean? And I do it too sometimes. It's like, oh, I know that already, something else. But the masters really get good at the basics and the fundamentals because that's everything. And so that's really what's going to give you the most return. So when I want to learn something and I'm reading something and I want to get the most out of it, how many of you have been the opposite? You read something, you get to the end of the page, and then you forgot what you just read. Look around. And you go back and you reread it, and you still don't know what you just read. Right? And that's a big problem, right? Because you're wasting your most valuable asset, which is your time. And so on the right side, the 3 questions I obsess about to get the most out of my reading or listening to a podcast or anything else, I ask myself these 3 questions. I ask myself, how can I use this? Now it's so basic, but I like to make the things that are gonna give you the highest return, I wanna make them as simple as possible so you do it. How can I use this? And this is your creativity. You're listening to me as I speak here and all the other speakers, and you're asking, how can I use this? Because you have a dominant question you ask all the time, and it's been imprinted on you since you were a child, right? And so for me, growing up as the boy with the broken brain, I would be very introverted, very shy, and my superpower back then was being invisible, right? Because I didn't want to be seen or heard because I didn't feel like I was enough. And that's just what my reality was. But my imagination would kick in all the time because I would watch people and observe them and ask, why is that person so smart? Why am I working? Why do I have to work 3 times harder to do worse than this person, right? And the question I would ask all the time was, how can I make this better? Because I was obsessed. And the key to reading comprehension is asking more questions. If you read a page in a book, get to the end and not get anything out of it, it's because you're not asking questions, because questions are the answer. Questions are the answer because ask and you shall receive. And so that's all thinking is. When you really break down functionally what thought and thinking is, when you're in a corner thinking to yourself, you're asking questions and then you're answering them. And you probably are like, is that true? You notice you had to ask a question to be able to think about that, right? The second question I obsess about, and I would capture it on the right side to be able to, when you're taking notes throughout today and the rest of your life, on the right side I would say, why must I use this? Because here's the thing, the biggest lie in the personal development industry is that knowledge is power. It is. It's just you feel like you got points because you signed up for a seminar or a webinar, you bought a book and it sits on your shelf and it becomes shelf help instead of self-help because it just sits there, right? But it doesn't become, the truth is, what people don't tell you is all the podcasts, coaching, conferences, online programs, none of it works unless you work, right? Is that fair to say? Like you can't read a book on doing like push-ups and get benefit from that. It just doesn't work, right? So you have to do the work. So I'm asking myself, how can I use this? And I'm coming up with all these ideas. That's the creativity part. And then I'm asking, why must I use this? Because if it's not a must, you're not gonna do it because you have plenty of other things to do. Is that fair? Because there's a success formula, head, heart, hands. You could think about things in your mind, set goals in your head and affirmations, KPIs, your objectives, but if you're not acting with your hands and you're procrastinating, raise your hand if you ever procrastinated before, right? All of us. If there's a gap between your head and your hands, check in with the second H, which is your heart, right? The emotion. We do things emotionally. We are emotional creatures. We're not logical, we're biological. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, we're this chemical soup, and so we want to be able to activate that. So head, heart, hands, another way of putting it are our eyes. Information, that's good, great, but sometimes you can listen to a podcast, it's a lot of information, but there's no inspiration to use it, fair? But sometimes you can listen to a speaker or learn something and it's inspiring, but you don't know what to do, right? Is that fair? So you have information, you have inspiration, and then you have implementation, where you're doing it. And I feel like when you get all 3 I's together, you have the most powerful I, which is integration. That's my goal for all of you, is that when you read something, you listen to something, you learn something, it becomes part of who you are. Reading is to your mind like exercise is to your body. And some of you are already doing this, so I'm preaching to you, so I'm gonna show you how to do it better. But those of you who aren't on the other spectrum reading at all, the average person reads like 2 books a year. Now, if you're reading like more than that, that means somebody's reading a lot less, right? On the other side. But it's the best exercise for your brain. People ask me all the time, how do I keep my brain young and how do I keep it energetic? And as I grow older, reading. But the problem is a lot of people don't indulge in it because they're not good at it. And I wouldn't be playing a lot of golf if I was horrible at it all the time. But in psychology, they have something called the confidence-competence loop. That the more competent you get at something, the more confident you get at it. And then the confidence will make you do it more, and you get more confidence, and then it cycles through in positive momentum, right? And you have examples of that in your own life. So what I'm asking about here, the second part, is the inspiration is why must I use this? And the third question I ask when I'm reading something is when will I use this? So 3 questions. How can I use this? Why must I use this? When will I use this? 3 powerful questions that lead to something which I think the number one productivity performance tool there is your calendar. Because a lot of you say you want to work out, or you want to meditate, or you want to do this self-care, and you know self-love and self-care is not selfish, and you know all this stuff, but how does your daily calendar reflect that? Do you know what I mean? Because I could look at anyone's calendar and see like where they are in life because of what they prioritize. First things first. I always tell people the key, because you live backwards. Like even when I'm spending time in these senior centers, pulling off some memories and learning from them also as well, what I'm learning is so much. And at the same time, I hear a lot of regrets. And the number one regret I hear ongoing for 2 decades of doing this is that somehow they lived their life for somebody else in some area of their life, right? And here's the thing, this is not a pleasant conversation, but this is what a coach who cares about. There's a difference between being nice and being kind. Do people feel that? Like these words are used interchangeably, like they mean the same thing. And this is a little pet peeve I have, and I'm not like really obsessive about like epistemology and words, but nice, anybody can be nice to you because they're not vested in you, right? You could go to the grocery store and the people working there and people behind you, they'd be nice to you, but or people can be nice to you because they want something from you, but someone who's kind is different. Right? Nice won't go out of their way, but a kind person will. And a kind person will tell you the truth, not necessarily what you want to hear, because it's coming from a place of caring and compassion. And what I'm talking about this specifically, when it comes to your brain, is like, we're gonna eventually, end this form of, we're gonna transition at some point, and many of us are gonna be in a coffin, we're gonna be in a box, and in that box, there's not a lot of room for possessions. And if you have cars and everything, that's wonderful, but there's certainly not a lot of room for regrets. And my challenge is, I remember I was doing a reading program for Jim Carrey, and we're in his kitchen making brain foods and guacamole and everything. Some of you know the genius foods I talk about. And I asked him, why do you do what you do? He was like, Jim, I act completely silly on camera because I want to give people who are watching permission just to be themselves. And that's the most important, to free people from concern. Because here's the thing, if you buy into the opinions of other people, you're gonna go broke, right? If you're looking to be fueled by other people's expectations and opinions of yourself, then you're gonna run out of gas. And you're like, what does this have to do with reading? It comes back to this. Having the mental energy, or some people just don't read because of how it looks to other people, right? How many of you have people outside of this room that really don't understand why you're in this room? Look around, like, why are you listening to another podcast? Why are you buying another book? Why are you doing this all the time? How many people have people like that? And here's the thing, like, sometimes the people that care about you the most are the ones that you give the power to hold you back. They don't hold you back, but you give them the power to do so. And I'm not saying it's easy when it's your spouse and your family. I'm not at all saying it's easy, because sometimes learning like life is messy. But I'm here to say that the best thing you could do, because you can't change them. How many people realize you can't change another person, right? Think about how hard it is for you to change yourself, and much less change somebody else. And so that's very difficult. But the best thing you could do is be an example, right? That if you're going through difficult times, they can define you, they could diminish you, or they could develop you. But you decide.